I don't think the white horse is a good one. I believe the white horse, as well as the red horse, as well as the black horse, as well as the pale horse, they're all bad ones. It comes, but not with a sword, it comes with a bow. And crown has been given. And that word has been given is like when in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, when God gives people to believe a lie, is in that context. It is being given, but not in terms of God crowning Satan or God, but rather allowing. Okay, when God goes and says, He gave them to believe a lie, it's like allow them to believe it. Okay, Denise, you got a comment on that?
Just a comment, yeah, that I don't know what you understand about the bow, but I know that Apollo, the god Apollo, has a bow, and
Yes,
that's one of his symbols.
that's right. And it comes with, it's a sun god. It's a sun god. Okay, so I want you to notice something. There's a number of places where you can actually, when it says, and I saw still another angel, or I saw another angel overlapping with the story that I just told you, kind of thing. The story that I just told you about the trumpets and the disasters and the impersonation of Christ. So that I just gave you a number of places where you can actually link it or overlap it. Revelation chapter 7, in the beginning, when the angels were there, and Revelation chapter 9 with the falling of Satan. I believe he's actually on the 8th one, on chapter 8. And I'll tell you why in a second. Notice chapter 8, verse 1. When he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Why do I believe we can actually, it would probably be anywhere around the trumpets, anywhere around the winds blowing and so on. But I believe it's probably closer there. So I would put chapter 10 in line or overlapping. The events that chapter 10 and chapter 11 are going to tell us will be overlapping. So they happen in parallel to the events that we've seen with the four trumpets, the fifth impersonation of Christ, the persecution of the saints, and to the point of the second coming. Why would I say that? Notice this. The seventh seal has now been opened. Now, let me ask you a question. If the seventh seal has been opened, what happens to that book now? If the seventh seal has been opened, what happens to the book? Remember the book in chapter 5? A book that was sealed with 7 seals? So if the seventh seal has been opened, what happened to the book?
Would that mean that it's unlocked?
The book is now unlocked. The book is now open. So that's why I will actually say that these events of chapter 10 and 11 are linked past the sealing of the people. Notice the book is being unsealed, but people are being sealed. Have you noticed that? The book being unsealed, but people being sealed on chapter 7. Now, if you have because we will probably don't have time to cover this, but we have a series on a YouTube channel called War of Inheritance, and we actually deal with the book in more detail. War of Inheritance, and Denise will have the link, and we'll put the link also on our channel down below for War of Inheritance. And we're dealing a little bit more with the book and how it's a book of inheritance, and how is it that seals are being taken out, but people are being sealed at the same time. Okay, so we know from chapter 8, verse 1, that if the seventh seal has been taken away, the book has to be unsealed. Right? Okay, now let's go to put that overlapping story. So in other words, a story that is happening parallel to the events of the trumpets. A story that is happening parallel, but from a different angle. Now from the angle of what's actually happening to the children of God. So what we have seen with the trumpets is what's happening with those that are being tormented with the scorpions, etc. They are being deceived with the big deception, etc., etc., etc. We've seen it from that angle. Now, from chapter 10 and 11, we're going to see it from the angle of God's children in the same kind of period of time. So we should expect to start the chapter 10. If I link it there with the opening of the book, we should actually see and expect a book being opened. Let's see what we find. Chapter 10 of Revelation 10 starts like this. So I saw a still, and that word still means overlapping to the story. I saw still another mighty angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like the pillars of fire. He had a little book open in his hand, and he set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. Oh, there you go. The book is open. And by the way, you can just use the Lego pieces of the big Titanic in the little bits that you want. And you can just talk about, the little book being certain parts and so on. But if you use the book of Revelation, there's only one book written there, and it's the book seal that is now open. If we just consistent with what we're reading, there's a whole chapter about a book that is sealed, and now as a book that is open. We have to be consistent with that. Now, notice also, the book was sealed, okay, written on both sides. Seal written on both sides. And now I want you to notice that little detail because we're going to look into it. So, this mighty angel has a foot on the sea and a foot on the land. Now, you can read it two different ways. You can actually literally read it as a territorial. Okay, he's marking his territory on the sea and the land, right? It's on the sea and the land. Okay, I'm marking it territorial. But what was the sea representing? Let's go to be consistent. What was the sea representing?
Dead.
The dead. And those that dwell on the land will be the what?
Earthly.
The living. Although the earthly, the ones that dwell the earthly, but we are in the land in terms of, so it's a populated area. It's not non-populated, right? So what is actually, if we're talking about territorial, we can just look in at territorial from a physical point of view. Okay, it's marking territory. My feet on the land, my feet on the sea. I'm marking territory. This is my territory. Okay, and I got the book to prove it. But I want you to notice something. Jesus is the Lord of the dead in Christ, as well as of the ones that remain living. Do you know that those that went before us, they were also witnesses? They're now sleeping, and the sea will actually be called out to give up the dead. So we are the living witnesses, and their witness is living in terms of it's still there, but they are sleeping. You actually have two witnesses there. We have the ones on the land and the ones on the sea. The ones that are still living and the ones that are sleeping. Have you noticed that? I want you to notice that. One has tasted death in terms of the sleep death, others not yet. The ones that are pilgrims on the land, which will be us, haven't tasted death yet, or at least not the sleeping death. The ones on the sea, yes, from the point of view. So in that way, we also being consistent. All right. Now notice this. I'm going to ask you a question, and you tell me. Let me just read a little bit more, and then I'll ask you the question. Verse 3. I cried with a loud voice. And cried with a loud voice, and as when a lion roars. When he cried out, 7 trumpets uttered their voices. Now, when the 7 thunders, sorry. Now, when the 7 thunders uttered their voices, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, seal up the things which the 7 thunders uttered, and do not write them. The angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised up his hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that are in it, the earth and the things that are in it, the sea and the things that are in it. Well, in that, and there should be delayed no longer. How is your version saying it? Time no longer? Time no longer. If you are reading from the King James, it would be time no longer. In this particular case, delayed no longer or no more delayed is actually more accurate.